Hey everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Title Scoop. So this week we are still talking about life estates. Last week we talked about terminology and just some of the basics. And this week we're going to talk about life estate creation, termination, and then just some of the things that we do see from time to time with life estates. So as you probably know, most of the time a life estate's created in a deed, but there are a few other ways to do that. One way that you can do it is it may be a statute within your state. That's probably going to be something like your state recognizes dower or curtsy. And if so, perhaps that statute says if the spouse dies, the remaining spouse will have a life estate in the property. Now, again, your state has to recognize dower or curtsy, but that could be an example of when a statute might create a life estate. Another way that I've seen is in a will, where the will was very specific as to a life estate after death. The person would die, they leave the fee to their kids, but a life estate, say, to their lifelong companion, something like that. That way, the person's taken care of, they have the house as long as they're alive, but then the kids will have the house once that person passes away. Now, when you're creating a life estate, there's actually not any specific language. I think we talked a little bit about this last week, but it just needs to be really clear as to the intent that that's what they're doing. So you might see it in a variety of ways. You might see something like to A for life, to B for A's life, B conveys fee simple to the kids, but reserves a life estate to himself. Like I said, you're going to see it a variety of ways. If you're ever questioning whether it really is created, you can certainly call underwriting. But as long as it's pretty clear that the intent was to create a life estate, we're going to recognize it as a life estate. Now, what you will notice is that a life estate doesn't always state who the remainder is. And as far as I know, there is no requirement that if there is a remainder, it has to be in the same document as the document creating the life estate. So maybe you would see separate. I've never seen that, but I did find that there wasn't any statutes, at least in the ones that I looked at, that required those to be together. Now, some interesting things to know about life estates, and these are things that do pop up from time to time and we get questions on. A life tenant usually can sell, mortgage, lease, dispose of that life interest, right? That life estate interest, as long as there's no condition in the original document where it was created that they can't do that. So as long as there's no prohibition, they can do whatever they want with that life estate. Now, one, that may not be possible. Bank may not lend on a life estate, but it is a possibility. At least it could happen. Also, like the life estate holder, the remainder and reversioner also can transfer, they can encumber, they can also deal with the fee interest. However, it's going to be subject to the life estate. So this is probably the most common scenario that we see. The parent had conveyed the property to their kids. They reserved a life estate. Kids want to sell or mortgage now. And in that case, we just need to make sure everyone is in agreement or that we're dealing with that life estate. And if not, then there's going to be an exception as to the life estate on the policy. Same scenario, mom has a life estate, kids own the fee, kids want to sell, mom agrees. Everyone can sign a deed there. The life estate merges with the fee, and we have the fee simple now, no life estate remains. You may occasionally see where a parent conveys to kids, they reserve a life estate, and then they also want to have the power to sell or encumber without the remainder. And in that case, it's an extra hazardous risk. So you're going to want to reach out to your underwriter to, one, see if it's even allowed in your state. That would be one thing. But two, if so, we may need to jump through some hoops to make sure, because we're probably going to want consents, honestly, or something, even if it's out there, just because, again, it's an extra hazardous risk to have that situation. So we know one way, of course, that a life estate can terminate, and that's death. And that's the death of the person whose life measures the duration of the life estate. And again, that's usually spelled out in the document, so we know who we're measuring. When that happens, you're usually going to want to get a death certificate, an affidavit of death, something like that. If you're not sure, call underwriting. And you're usually going to want to record that. But also, I say a best practice is put a recital in the deed when they're selling that the life estate terminated, and put that information, just because it clears up the chain of title for anybody that's looking after. Now, sometimes when a life estate is created, it has language that if an occurrence happens, the life estate will terminate. I've had that where someone had a life estate only as long as they resided in the property. Well, they moved into a nursing home, so we had to jump through some hoops, but get some documentation that life estate did actually terminate when she moved out. Obviously, a life estate terminates when we have a merger of the fee and the life estate. We've talked about that a couple times. And then last but not least, some states do have some statutes that allow for the termination of a life estate, although the ones that I found required some type of case to be open in order to have that happen. I don't know that I found any that were automatic. If you guys have a state and you know there's an automatic termination of a life estate in a statute, let me know because I'd be curious what that is. All right, that's it for this week. If you guys have questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.